Hello, Truth with Dr. Dara, and it is Thursday night and we are just getting started. For those of you just jumping on, we are on Instagram Live and Facebook, and I am really pumping it with technology right now because I even have my laptop going with me at the same time for the questions. This week was such an unbelievable, overwhelming response of questions and comments, so I was really excited. I was looking forward to tonight. I missed it last week, and I think it's so imperative because we're going to talk about saying no, and at the end of the day, it was really about me saying no and figuring out what's in the best interest for me. Some of you are jumping on. Hello. Hey, Jacqueline. I'm so glad that you came on, and I see some on Instagram. I'm going to go ahead and kill my background music. All right, so let's talk. You know, a lot of times we get caught in this idea of thinking that we have to help other people and do things that other people want. And in my practice, I see people in my office, and I work with people also on location. I work with a lot of athletes, and I go out to them and I get to travel and do some fun things, very unorthodox and typical traditional. I mean, even the way that I practice therapy is different because I do rapid resolution therapy, and I don't do typical talk therapy. And even around that is creating different boundaries and making some set, I don't want to say rules, but ideas and consistent things that I do. And often I get stuck too with the idea of like, oh, what if I say no, and how will that affect me, and how will that affect other people? And then get caught in the idea, if I'm not pleasing other people, then there's not satisfaction, and maybe I'm not good enough, or they're thinking that I'm not good enough, and their opinions might be affecting how I continue playing out things moving ahead. So I'm going to jump into this first question. I think it is a great question. Jen and some others, John, I see you're on. So I've got you on Facebook Live, Instagram Live, and I am going to read the first question. And it was from a young woman from Germany. So Isra, I don't know if you're getting to see this now because it would be the middle of the night for you, but I know that this was your question. And she said, I'm a volunteer firefighter, and I do that because I really love helping people. I think that it's a great trait, but I often fail at saying no. I help people in the extent that I'm not happy anymore myself, investing a lot of time into minor problems of others, and afterwards I feel like I made a mistake. And she says that she even sometimes feels selfish when she says no. And I think that so many of us can relate, because the way that I see things and my ideas around it, I'll offer you some ways that I think, and you can take it. Think of it like a buffet tonight. You can take what you want and you can leave what you don't want. And the idea around saying no is really you're saying yes to yourself. It's when we're growing up that the way that these imprints have been made in our brain that saying no is a bad thing. And it does correlate. It correlates when you were a child, the way that you were responded to. Yes, I'm going to talk about when you were a kid. The way that you were responded to when you were a child is really imperative to this. So if you felt that if you said no when you were a kid and it left you with a sense of guilt, then often that's I use the word imprint, that continues on in other aspects. And then as you have different relationships, then it sets the tone and your experience with saying no. And so as Esra mentioned in her question, it is about like, so here she is and she's a firefighter, and then if she says no, she gets left, and that guilt that she's experiencing isn't of any value for anybody else, because, you know, let's talk about guilt for a moment, because a lot of the questions that I got really revolve around this idea of guilt, us thinking that we should do something different or better or more than the way that we've done it. You've heard me say about how detrimental it can be shoulding all over yourself. So if I say no to somebody, does that leave me feeling like I have let somebody down? And at the end of the day, you are the one who's let down because you feel completely preoccupied. I see a couple more jumping on. I see Leslie, you came on Instagram, and Lauren and my mom and Jen, you guys are all on Facebook. And Lauren says, great timing, guilt, right? Like, I'm sure Lauren, is there something specific if you do as far as guilt and saying no? Just write down that question. And if you guys have any questions, you can always put them down below. So the idea of guilt when we're saying no, and here this young woman who's in Germany is saying that I feel bad when I say no, and I think that I've done something that is not optimal when I say no. But you know, if I'm driving down the street and I'm with my kids and somebody is driving next to me and they're completely full of guilt, then I risk the chance of them hitting into my car. I know that sounds a little bit dramatic, but when guilt is circulating in our head, then it is creating an influx and it's affecting other people around us, not just the person that you're saying no to, but everybody else. So your best you is going to create that strength in other people. And the whole idea around no is, again, back to when we were a kid, that if we said no, it was a bad thing. It meant that we were a bad girl or a bad boy. I was working with a really amazing woman today, and we talked in this session, we were doing a rapid resolution therapy session, and it was this idea around thinking that she should be doing things better or different than the way that she's been doing it in relationships. And it's this buzz, like this static that plays in her head. You know, I think of our mind like our apps, like our phones that we have, where we go ahead and put all the apps. Remember when you first got it and all the information would be on there, and you had to learn that you had to shut down the apps. And when you had all the apps open and you were trying to download a new message or a video or new information, what would happen? It would get stuck and you couldn't get any more information into the phone. So I think of our brain that way, that when we have open apps, we can't get new information in. So therefore, often the guilt that happens just loads on and loads on and loads on. So it's imperative that we clear out that guilt or those apps so that new information can come in. So I'm going to check in. I see more of you jumping in. Mike, it's good. I can't see you, but you can see me. Carol, Madi, you're on. Jacqueline says she loves saying no. Elaine, yay, hi. And Cheryl, hi, Cheryl Lee. And let's see, Lauren says she's a mom, so working as a mom who has to send her kids to daycare is a horrible feeling, but my best me would not be able to do the stay-at-home parenting, but there's still guilt there. You know, the thing is, a lot of times when we're talking about guilt, we have this idea that we shouldn't feel guilt or we shouldn't say no. So I'm cool with the idea that sometimes we do feel a sense of guilt. What happens is that when we're telling ourselves that we shouldn't feel guilt, that it builds up and it builds up. Because even around the whole idea no, whether it's no, I cannot help you do this tonight, where it goes with the no is when you're saying no to yourself, your body doesn't hear the no. It's a confusing concept. Stay with me. If you're saying no to other people, it's of great value. But when you're saying no to yourself, like, Lauren, don't feel guilty for taking your kids to school, your brain negates the no, and all it hears is feel more guilt, feel more guilt, feel more guilt. So the part of that, and you're saying it right there, like being your best self is having your kids go to school so that when you can join with them, you spend some time. You know, even when moms are home with kids, I hope this is okay, and a lot of you feel comfortable with me saying this, that even if you spend time, like if I'm home on a Sunday and I'm with my kids the whole day, I can't be present with them every single moment, as hard as I try. I mean, I'm a victim to my social media and my phone and technology, or I'm sitting with them and all of a sudden it's like ideas, and I get distracted. So even if I'm with them, I'm still gonna be in a different space. So think of it in a way that when you are sending your kids to childcare, or when you're saying no to people, what you're doing is you're organizing and you're prioritizing your time with them. So you're not even saying no to them, you're saying yes to you, and then you're saying yes to being available to them in a different way. Where it gets stuck for us is thinking that by saying no, that we're doing something wrong. And going back to when I was working with this incredible woman today, and the idea around her thinking that she should be doing better, you know, some of you have children, and think back to when your kid had a temper tantrum before they were even 2. When they had a temper tantrum, it was in such agony and it was in such magnitude that your child literally thought that they were going to die if their needs did not get met. I know that sounds a little bit dramatic, but the way that the frontal lobe works, it's not developed yet. It literally thinks that it is going to die if it is not getting its needs met. Hence, the child has such a strong reaction and they're argumentative, or you can't get them to be cooperative. So in that moment, there is nothing else that comes to mind. I mean, they scream like literally they cannot get another breath. as you have that situation and you grow, so I have a 3.5-year-old, I can't believe he's 3.5, and then I have a 5.5-year-old, can't believe she's 5.5, and I see the transition into her being 5.5. And when she's 5.5 now, there starts to be this sense not only of this feeling that she's going to die when her needs don't get met, but now she's looking to see if she's getting approval from me. She's looking to see if she's getting approval from the people that she respects, her grandma, and everybody else around her. And that's a big transition. So it goes from I'm feeling that sense of I'm going to die if my needs aren't met, to I'm going to die if my needs are not approved by other people. It's really interesting to me because, you know, when I go swimming with my daughter and we get in the pool and I say, Elia, you are a great swimmer. She looks over to me and she says, thanks, Mommy, I know, which is amazing. I want to know where the shift happens when you get into a pool with a child and you say, well, Elia, you're a great swimmer. And she can look at me and say something like, will create some sadness for me. Oh, Mommy, I don't know. I'm not as good as the other kids. Or, Mommy, I don't know. I don't think I'm good enough. I want to know where that transaction, where that shift happens in our minds, that it goes for kids. And it does, because they're seeking approval from other people. I see a lot more of you are jumping on. Nelson, good to see you on here. Joy, thank you guys for tuning in. If you have questions, go ahead and put them on the bottom. We're talking about saying no, and we're also talking about how that guilt impacts and affects you. So from you're under 2 years old, and it's a near-death experience when you feel like your needs aren't being met. Then when you transition into being 5, then you're starting to have a sensation and organization around conceptualizing what other people are thinking and meeting their needs and getting their approval. And then as you continue on later in life into teenage, I think some of us are still teenagers, I am, it starts to lead into this idea around thinking that you are your own observer, that you're your own judger, or creating this idea around how it should be and what should be going on. So then it's you. If I'm not doing something, then I feel guilty that it's not good enough. It should be a certain way. And that transitions for us. So the reality of it is it can't be any different than the way that it is. So when you are feeling guilty, ask yourself, what is it that you want it to look like? What is the situation that's going to create the best scenario for you? And, you know, I talk to a lot of people. I mentioned before, I work with a lot of athletes, adolescent athletes, pro athletes. I work with people that come in and they're experiencing significant amounts of trauma. I work with men. I work with women. This past few weeks, I've worked with a significant amount of adolescent guys, and the same thing keeps showing up. It's this idea of thinking that they should have done it different than the way it was being done for them before. And this idea of thinking that they didn't do it right. I see a question. My daughter is 6 and she always needs validation from others. I feel like to a point it happens socially, pre-K, etc. Yes, agree. I definitely think it does happen socially, and it is imperative. I also think it's a natural part of what transitions in us. So if we look at it from a perspective that it is natural and it is something that happens, then I think we can be more welcoming and less judgmental and hard on ourselves when we are creating that. Because when you're creating the idea around saying no, first you want to think about it from a fundamental, foundational level, physically. What are the things that you're doing that's creating your best self, your energy? I know people say this to me right away, like, well, I don't say no to cake. Well, what is it? What would it optimally look like? I got a tongue twister in there. All of you try to say optionally or optimally 3 times in a row. But what would it look like if you would like for that to be? So what would it look like for you if you were to say no around things that you're doing physically, around exercise, food, and your schedule? That would be an imperative part to start, because as you're creating that, then you're putting energy in the direction of where you want it to go. And then it leans over into emotional meaning relationships, because I've got news for you. If you're having difficulty setting those limits and those boundaries with yourself physically, it's going to carry over into your relationships, into other people. You know, if I don't say no about going to sleep, then I'm going to feel grouchy. And then when I pick up that phone call that comes in at 10 o'clock at night, I may feel resentful, and then I'm not even giving them my best self. So if we go back to it as a foundation, I mean, the past few weeks have definitely been very interesting for me. I canceled this last week. I cancel this. Those of you who know me, like, I don't cancel. I don't not show up. But I was sick. I was clearly sick. And it's a complicated thing because for me, some of you might have seen my post, I felt stressed. And feeling sick made me feel like a sense of weakness. It made me feel like I didn't say no, that I did not take care of myself, and that I did something wrong. And that's the same feeling that a lot of us feel when we do say no, that we're letting people down. But in essence, you are allowing yourself to be present for them. You are allowing that when you do hang out with them and you do things, you are completely all in. Because at the end of the day, do you want somebody who's just gonna kind of go, all right, let's go to dinner, but they don't feel like they're with you and they don't feel like you're connected? So saying no is really just about a perspective, and again, the way that it's been transitioned and been ingrained in your head. You know, the work that I do is so amazing to me because it's the way that we're wired. It's the way that messages have been intertwined into our head. And the great news is just as those messages have been put in our head, we can take them out of our head. We can recode them because they've been coded. Our brains are coded like remember the Texas Instrument computers, ones and zeros, and it goes in. And the same way that it goes in, we can reconnect it. So if there's been this idea around guilt, let me think of something here. Is there a song that all of you can recollect that, you know, I see a couple of you joining on, and I see Robbie, you just came on, and Carlos, and I said hello to Mike earlier, and I see some others. There's a couple of you on here who, I mean, a lot of you are very special to me, but there's two of you on here that I used to go riding on my motorcycle. Yes, a Harley. So there's a couple of you that are smiling right now. And we used to go riding, and there's a significant song that just comes in my head every time I think of my motorcycle or going out riding with you guys. And I'll spare you of me singing it. But the same way that that song goes in, it creates a connection. So there's ideas even around the times that we say no or we say yes that creates different visions, whether we connect with it through our ears or through our nose or through our mind, that goes with that. So the same way that we create those connections, we can recreate them in other ways. Make sense to you guys? It makes sense to me when I think of it like that, because then I think of how my mind is coding and how it creates those connections. And when I'm working with a young athlete, often it's a challenge to say no. It's a challenge to say no to themselves, like their schedule, or even saying no to a coach if they don't feel like something is optimal for them, because the idea is that you're saying no, that you're being disrespectful. But in all essence, if you say it in a way that there's the communication, then you're really saying to them, I respect and I care about what you say, and I want to give you the best of me. So I have a couple more questions that I think are really great that I got this week. And for a lot of you, I don't know if you noticed that I have a private Facebook group, and it's called Truth with Dr. Dara. And there was a lot of commentary around this, and I even asked people, what could you say no to this week? And I got some great answers. I mean, anywhere ranging from saying no to colleagues that, you know, you feel like you can't get your work done because they're not taking no for an answer and they want to talk to you, and then feeling a sense of guilt around it. Or some people responded no to having sex, or said no to setting limits and boundaries, no to focusing on other people's problems. But what I love about it most is that the fact of the matter is that it was brought to light, that people thought of things, and just by thinking of it and writing it down, it just draws awareness to it. It doesn't mean that you have to do anything with it or to it. It just means that it's increasing the idea of making that shift, of making that change. So as you're on with me right now, I want you guys to think about what would be an area that you would like to say no to. Where would it mean the most for you to say no, meaning that you would be saying yes? So where can you say yes in your life more? All right, where can you say yes in your life more? The other thing that comes up for me, and it was a question, and she said, I feel like I'm so codependent. I say no all the time. I think the word codependent is really interesting to me, because I feel like it gets this bad connotation. And what does codependent even mean, right? Like, codependent means that what? You want to help people? What are you going to get in trouble for, like, liking people too much and wanting to make people happy? I don't know. It's a really confusing word, and it gets this connotation that it's a negative thing. The way that I see it is, if you're taking care of yourself, then you're free to help other people. And helping other people is just problematic when it gets in the way of taking care of your own needs. I see a couple questions. I'm so bad at saying no at work, and then I never end up getting my own work done. But I feel bad because I'm assisting others, and I get scared that people will start talking about how I don't want to assist. As a supervisor, it's kind of my job. Well, awesome. I really appreciate the feedback and you bringing that to light again, because I know that affects so many people. But the idea around it is, if you saying no is you're saying yes to those other people, and then when you are connected with them, then you're going to be completely present and there, and they're going to get the best of you. So what is helpful for me is communicating that before I even start, kind of letting people know. I remember in my group psychotherapy class, that was a few hundred years ago, I had a great teacher, and I can't believe I'm remembering this, and there's a book, and it's Yalom, and it teaches like group therapy, and the one thing that I do remember is that you want to set the tone when you're starting a group, which, right, you want to walk in and tell people what you're going to do, what the topic is, and how long you're going to do it. So what comes to mind for me is when you're in that situation, and you're going to sit down to your work, let people know what it is that you want to do. Like, hey, I'm going to start doing this right now, and I'm going to be available to you in 15 minutes. So that lets them know that they're important to you, and you're going to be available to them too. The other critical part is talking to people as if they're already doing what you want them to be doing. And that is a big part of saying no. So it's not like you're feeling like you're going, no, 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 no. You are telling them the way that you want it, the way that it's already happened. So if I say to Jen, I see you have a question up there, that, let's see, a no that we can't go to dinner. Instead of saying no, I'm saying, hey Jen, I really appreciate the invitation, and I'm really excited for us to get together in 2 weeks. So right there, it opens up the opportunity and the idea that it's something that is going to happen for us. It's just not right now. And when it does happen for us, it's going to be a great experience. Jen says, I struggle with saying no to overtime at work. I feel like I have to always be available, and so that I'm more valuable to my employer. And when I have to say no, I feel guilty, like that making their life difficult. I totally get that, Jen, and you're the kind of person that completely cares and you put yourself out. But you know, I don't think that you walk around and it affects the impact of the work that you're doing, but it affects how you feel about you. So maybe that's where, when you're starting the week, you can let them know what your shifts are or what your limitations are as far as timing, so that if they do ask you and they forget or they touch base with you, then you can let them know, oh, hey, remember I had told you that I'm going to have to stop at this time, or I'm not available. Because if you had already committed to another family, you wouldn't be able to stay over. And again, you doing that for them is also, I mean, Jen, you have a really important job. You work taking care of kids. So you're setting that precedent not only for them, but for you. And Lauren, you brought up the whole mom guilt thing. A big game changer for me is when I realized, and I really started to think about, that the age of my kids, I do not want to teach them guilt. I do not want to teach them that. And I have a young lady and I have a young man, and I don't want to teach Elia that she needs to feel guilty for being a woman or for saying no. And the same to Nevin. But even when it's about like, you know, our roles and identities and sexuality and all these different things that are in our life, I don't want it that, you know, as a man, you can say no, and as a woman, you can't. I mean, I know I'm putting a lot and getting even farther deeper with it, but that has definitely been a game changer for me, because I would feel guilty if I was leaving the house, if I was going to work, or, you know, I was like this martyr that I could only leave to go do my work. It would be a crime if I was to leave and go and have lunch with a friend. But at the end of the day, what I realized is that me having lunch with that friend brings me home so spirited and happy and so present with my kids, and not feeling like, oh, I have to do it. And the other part of it, you know, around mommying is that it's seasonal. Things change. It's so liquid, and you go through different stages, and then also your kids need you at different times. And not even just your kids. I'd like to like put that out to the people in your family and your life. They need you in different times. And so you transition, your needs change. And so just because you said it the way that it was before, it doesn't mean that that's the way that it always has to be. So circling around, we just have a couple more minutes, and these have been great feedback and great questions, and you guys can always send me a message offline. You can email me at dara@drdara.com. Be sure to sign up for my newsletter. There's a lot of exciting things happened, and like I mentioned, you know, I wasn't feeling that good, and I've really taken this saying no thing to heart, because I want to be the most effective that I can be as a psychologist, as a mom. And so again, it's not about what I can say no to, it's what I can say yes to. And some of you know I'm writing this book. In fact, some of you on here have been my inspiration and encouragement to make that happen. And more, it really starts to come together and accumulate, like, what are my priorities? And if I do this, how is that going to affect other people, and the timing and what I'm doing? So thank you again, guys, for tuning in. Stay tuned. Next week, we're going to talk about your love cup being full. I'm taking advantage of relationships as we're in February. And the idea around relationships is so interesting to me, because it's this idea of whether you're in a relationship or you're not in a relationship. And thanks to Hallmark, it gets so, put out there and so intensified. So next week, we're going to talk about your love cup and what that looks like being full. So stay tuned, and also jump in the group. If you have any questions, send them over to me. Again, thanks, guys, for tuning in, and have an amazing night. Oh, before I forget, also, next Tuesday, I'm going to be doing a webinar, so look out for that information. I'm going to be doing it with a really great colleague of mine, Kendra Simpkins, and she's part of Sarasota Rapid Resolution Therapy, and we had a great time doing it a couple weeks ago, so we're going to be jumping on that too, talking about clearing the unconscious parts, the conundrums of relationships, deep down inside too. I see some of you just jumping on now, so I'm glad that you guys could come on. You can always go back and watch it again, and then be sure to ask any questions. So have a great night, everybody. Take care, and I'll see you guys soon next week. Make sure you DVR Grey's Anatomy so you can tune in for Truth with Dr. Dara. Take care.